Hello, thank you for tuning in. You're watching Real with Tennille. Special thanks to Cascade Media, what'supkansascity.net for this wonderful opportunity. Our special guest today, I am so excited, is Miss Dacia Moore of Second Wind Counseling.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's fine, Tennille. How are you?
Awesome, awesome.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Now, something I want to know, especially about counseling, since you have your own counseling business, why is counseling so important?
Well, I think counseling is really important, and a lot of people don't understand what counseling is. They think that it is getting advice, or that you're sitting down or lying down on a couch,
Or is it that I'm crazy?
Yeah. And people say, I'm not crazy. I don't need anybody to help me. But I think we all need help. And I'll tell you my story in a little bit.
Okay.
But I think we all need help and could benefit from somebody who is outside of your circle, who doesn't know you, who is pledged to be confidential, and who can see things a little bit differently. Now, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees because you're right in the middle of it. So a counselor is that person who is outside of your circle who can help you with a different perspective, and that is a beautiful thing. Plus, they're trained to listen specifically for different themes in your life that may be causing you more pain than you need to be in.
So then you're not actually preaching or telling somebody you need to do this, and this. You're actually kind of letting them self-evaluate themselves throughout the process.
Yes, you are listening, and a good counselor, okay, because we have all kinds of counselors and therapists and psychologists. But a good therapist or counselor will not be your friend or give you advice, because you are responsible for making your own choices. But what we will do is pose questions to you to get you to think about different alternatives and maybe make suggestions on perspectives that you hadn't considered. But you make the final decision. So whenever a person comes to me, the first thing I tell them is, I am not your mother. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will listen and share my thoughts with you. And as a collaborative relationship, we'll discuss the best way for you to move forward. But you have to live with your choices. See, the one thing I don't want people to do is go home and say, well, my therapist said I should do such and such. No. You have to make the decision, because who lives with your decisions?
You.
That's right. Yeah, so I don't want you blaming me.
Right. Now, what are the stigmas? And are stigmas for any race, or is it more so in the Black community? What is the stigma? Why do people not want to get counseling?
Well, I think there's a stigma about counseling in the African American culture, in the Hispanic culture, in the Asian culture. In the African American culture, most people think, or many people think, first of all, I'm not crazy. Why should I tell some stranger, my business? We also have a historical perspective where people, generally, therapists have been Caucasian, and they come into your home or into your life to tell you what to do and to maybe take your kids away, or you have some kind of consequence where it's negative. So that's it's kind of a residual from that. But a lot of African Americans think I should just be able to pray my way through. I should be strong enough to handle this. And it's really not a matter of strength, and it's certainly not a matter of lack of faith in many cases. What it is that you are so overwhelmed with your situation that you are stuck. And you need to, if you were stuck we have winters in Kansas City. Right? You ever been stuck in?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So can you get yourself out?
No.
Well, sometimes you can. But sometimes if you're stuck too deep, what do you need?
You need a tow truck.
You need somebody to help you. Somebody from outside to pull you out. And that's what a counselor does from a mental health perspective.
That is very good. Now, are there certain situations that warrant counseling, like a death in the family or a divorce, or are there certain things that you definitely need counseling for?
Well, there are a lot of things that you could get counseling for. I would say in general, these are the three criteria. If you're in pain too long, so if it's lasting too long, if it's too intense, and if each episode is too long in duration. So we look at intensity, frequency, and duration. And by that I mean, for instance, and what is too long? That is certainly, it's subjective to you. But when you have your girlfriend start saying, girl, you need to go get some help, that's an indicator that you are still stuck in whatever situation. It could be from divorce. It could be a career transition. And these are things that I specialize in.
Okay.
It could be a parent-child conflict. Maybe your child is struggling with misbehavior and you don't know what to do. It could be a bona fide mental health issue. There are a lot of diagnoses that require counseling: ADD, ADHD, conduct disorder, bipolar disorder, personality disorder. So there are many things that would cause a person distress, but what you're looking for generally is if the distress has lasted longer than it needs to, if it's still as strong as it was from the beginning, and if you're still having these bouts of whether it's anger, depression, crying spells, if you still are having the frequency of those bouts of depression or whatever, those are indicators that you are not moving through.
But so is it realistic for me to say, I'm sorry, I almost dropped my paper. Real with Tennille, so you saw the blooper. So is it realistic to say, okay, I've gone through a divorce or I've lost a child, it's been 6 months, you shouldn't still be grieving or crying? Is it 6 months? Is it 6 weeks? Or how does someone know that you've been in it too long, or that it is still as intense, or that you're still just as bitter or angry and going through the motions as you were when the situation first began? How are we supposed to know?
That's a great question. And it really depends on the individual, and it depends on what happened. For instance, if your parent dies, or if your marriage after 20 years dies and you get a divorce, after a 20-year marriage, you're not going to get over that in 6 months, or even a year, or even 3 years. I mean, it's going to take some time. So it's really very individual. I can't give you a specific time frame to say, okay, by this time you should be through this. Because some people think, if your parent dies or your child dies after 6 months, you should be over it. And that's not true. But generally what you're looking at is after a year, or at least a year and a half, when you've had the full spectrum of holidays without that person, and you're still feeling as intensely as you were when the thing first happened, that might suggest that you have not moved through it. So, but that's very general, that's very broad, because if you lose a child, I had a client who lost a 9-year-old daughter to a disease, and is she going to be over that in a year? No. Do you ever really get over that? You learn how to deal with it. So it really depends on what it is that you're struggling with. But I would say one of the things that you need to look at is if people at work start asking you or saying to you, you really need to go see somebody. If your friends start saying, have you thought about going to see somebody? If your parents or your family starts to say, those are indicators that other people are seeing that you are still in too much pain. So when you start having problems at work, at school, at home, in your relationships, and they are still as much of a problem as they were when the death first happened or the divorce first happened, those are indicators that you're stuck. Yeah, I've known people who are still as bitter 10 years later from a divorce as they were when they first got the divorce. That person is stuck.
Isn't that unhealthy?
Yes, it is.
I mean, not even just unhealthy from a mental perspective, but from a physical perspective.
Absolutely.
High blood pressure, diabetes. What I find, and I can't say so funny, but I just don't really get this, is that we're almost our own worst enemy. When someone does something to us, the person that offended us, they don't even know it. They don't care. They're not missing any sleep. Mm-hmm. But we're holding on to all this baggage. And like you said, a year, 10 years later.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time that you go to counseling and you say, okay, I've arrived. I can deal with this. I don't have to keep coming every week or every month. And also, what is a realistic time frame that someone would come to get counseling to get help?
Okay.
Is it once a week, once a month?
Yeah, most therapists see their clients once a week for about an hour. I do what's called brief therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay. So most of my clients I see anywhere from 3 months to a year, and depending on what the situation is. And I mentioned to you that I would tell you a little bit of my story, and my story is that I struggled with a very painful divorce. Was a single mother, did not expect to be divorced. You know, I had the dream or the fantasy of the white picket fence and being married the rest of my life. So when I got a divorce, that was traumatic for me. And my mother was saying, hey, you know, you need to go get some help. My friends were saying it, but I'm like, no, I got this. And only when my pastor came to my house and said, Dacia, if you don't get some help, you are going to lose your job and live with your mother the rest of your life. I said, oh no.
Not with mom.
No. So I went to counseling, and man, did she help me. She helped me so much that I said, you know what, I want to help other women the way that you helped me. So I went and got my master's degree in counseling. It took me a couple of years. Opened up a private practice, Second Wind Counseling and Consulting, and I specialize in divorce recovery because I certainly know the feeling or what it feels like to have the death of a marriage and to feel like a failure and to be a sudden single parent and all of that. So most counselors or many counselors specialize in an issue that they themselves struggle with. And it's in the struggle that you have the compassion for other people because you've been there.
Now, you also do some things with some angry children that have tantrums and who are rebellious. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I did my clinicals in residential treatment, and I actually fell into that because I knew the executive director at the time of a residential treatment facility here in Kansas City. And as I was working with those kids, I'm like, nobody told me about these kind of kids. So with my father and uncle and many of my relatives having experience in urban education and alternative education, I really did a lot of research on how do you educate a child who is highly disruptive. I mean, we had children in that school who had diagnoses with conduct disorder, intermittent explosive disorder. I mean, 90% of our students had a psychiatric disorder. Wow. And I saw parents struggling. As a staff, we struggled with that behavior. The children struggled with that behavior because we know as adults, if you're not successful in education, what kind of life are you going to have? You're pretty much going to have a life of crime because you have to support yourself in some way. So my heart goes out to children and to families who struggle with these kinds of angry, disruptive behaviors. And with the experience that I've had in residential treatment, I'm trying to help as many people as I can who are in that situation right now.
What are some things that make children angry or defiant or want to seek attention or act out? What are some things that you've noticed that kids are dealing with maybe in the home or other situations, and that are these actually manifestations of them crying out for help?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just plain defiance. I was listening to a radio show this morning and it talked about children who appear to have a bad seed. I mean, they get power and enjoyment from causing pain to their parents, even as young as 2 years old. So,
but is that true? I mean,
it is true.
It really is.
There, you know what? Children ages 2 through 5, that group of children are the most frequently suspended and expelled children out of all the children now in public education. Or that is the group that is growing the most, ages 2 through 5. And I'm giving this workshop, this series of workshops. And so I sent it out last week on Facebook, and I had one lady who Facebooked me back and said, Dacia, this is great, but we need tools for pre-K and kindergarten students because they are so out of control. They are so angry.
But how are you so angry and out of control at 2 and 3? I mean, you're not paying any bills. You're not going to work. What do you have to be angry about?
Well, some of it is the personality clash between the child and the parent. Some of it is the personality of the child. Like I told you, the radio show I was listening to, this little boy, he was 2 and 3 when he was this bad seed. He's 30 years old now.
Wow.
They interviewed him, and he remembers doing things intentionally because he liked the power. And he gave his mother the blues. She was on this radio show as well, and she said every day she cried because she felt like such a failure because her son was acting so bad, so angry, so defiant, and she was at her wit's end.
And he was actually just manipulative at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And at 30, he is so regretful. And, he says he's a mama's boy now, but he distinctly remembers intentionally doing things because he liked to see his parents running around and responding. He liked the power of being able to get them to do and respond in certain ways. So what makes a child angry? What makes a child defiant? That's $1 million question. There is not an easy answer. But the fact is, there are more defiant children in our schools today, in our homes. And as parents, we have to address that because we know we don't want them to grow up to be defiant adults because they're not going to be able to be successful.
I don't know if I can share this story with you, but since you said that and you talked about the bad seed, there's something that sticks out in my mind with me, and I hope my mom is not mad at me, but I'm so going to share this.
Uh-oh.
You watch TV a lot when you're little, right? And so you learn to look for that great escape to not get a whooping. Mm-hmm. So I have been acting up. I was actually going to true school. It was one of the worst years of my life. I was in the 5th grade. And I knew I was going to get a whooping. And so I lied and told my mom, literally, and this is so horrible, it was a bottle of iodine or something. And it, it says poisonous on there. Mm-hmm. No joke. And I told my mom that I was just so unhappy that I had thought about taking this iodine. It was a complete lie. I hadn't thought about the iodine. In my mind, I said, boy, this is the only thing that I can think of that I might at least 50% get out of getting this whooping. And so I told that to my mom in the 5th grade, didn't get the whooping, didn't think about it anymore. But here later in life, I didn't realize that my mom had always had it in the back of her mind that she thought that her child was really so upset that she really tried to would attempt to think about that in the 5th grade when it wasn't true. It was just an outlet to keep from getting a whooping. I didn't even know what suicide was.
Bad kid.
Bad seed. Couldn't spell it or nothing. And literally, like you said, at 30, it was literally almost 20 years later from being in the 5th grade. We were celebrating her birthday at Houston's. And it was all these people, friends and church friends. And I stood up and I said, I have a confession to make. I said, I really didn't try to commit suicide. I wasn't really going to take the iodine. That was the only thing I knew how to get out from getting a whooping. And we just cried and laughed. But it was really like a release because she really felt like, wow, what have I done as a parent that my child, and she was a single parent, would feel that life is so bad with me. And it really wasn't. I loved my mother to death. It was just that thing about that whipping,
So you see, it's a childish thing, and you helped your mother to see your side of it, but for all of this time, she's been holding that in her heart, like, and feeling like a bad mother.
And it is so horrible. And so now I just tell her all the time that I love her and how awesome she is, because I never want her to feel that way. And we were talking today, I thought it was so funny because, I do conferences and want to motivational speak and do different things. Well, she did that when I was growing up, and I was so angry because I was selfish. So I'm like, why are you going to the church? Why are you organizing and helping these other women? It's a family. We got things going on here.
Yeah.
And it is so funny to now see myself all these years later take what she has done and really try to take it to the next level. And all she was doing was helping and empowering and teaching people that they could be and live their best lives.
That's right.
And I'm really grateful because I know a lot of my friends whose parents have turned their back on them. They have no type of communication whatsoever. And I just think that would be a horrible way to live. I mean, I call my parents about nothing. Did you see Scandal? Now, I know my mom doesn't even watch Scandal, would never turn Scandal on. But it's just that connection.
Yeah.
I just want to talk
relationship.
to you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like when you guys went to Branson for her birthday, literally, that was the first time in 37 years that I have never not been with my mom on her actual birthday. And I literally sat around waiting, like, when is a good time to call and wish her happy birthday? She's not here. I literally didn't know what to do. So I woke up about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I called about 8. And I said, well, I've been wanting to call you since really about 6 o'clock. I've been thinking about it since 3. And she said, well, I was up, but I'm really glad you didn't. Yeah. But I just love her. And I think counseling is so important because I really honestly believe that I needed counseling. My mom had taken me to a counselor, you know, and they give you this book with people that don't look like you, whose parents have had a divorce or they've had something traumatic happen, and you're supposed to say, oh, this is great, I'm healed, I'm whole now.
Right, and it doesn't work
like that. And it doesn't work like that. And that's why I think what you're doing is so effective. And I am so for counseling. I say it all the time. We just pay them to tell us we're really not crazy. Now, that is just a joke.
Sometimes. Sometimes we tell you, yeah, you are crazy.
Prozac in the vending machine. That's what I used to say when I was at work. I'm like, they can't. But I'm really grateful because counseling, and I was sharing with you that you gave me those things about grief almost 15 years ago, and I didn't appreciate it then. But every year something has happened, and I went and pulled out this packet that you gave me, and something in there really met my situation. And I want us to get to a point that I'm okay with getting counseling. I can recognize that for whatever reason I am lacking something in my life. I'm not a whole person, and I want to do better. I want to change. And also I feel like once you change, then you can affect change in others. Once you get healed,
you can help other people. That's right. If you're stuck, you can't help anybody else get unstuck.
And it was so, I don't know, being stuck, it is really not a good place, because that's when really I noticed that I got more depressed and bitter and angry, because I'm like, I'm looking for light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm just still in this dark cloud. Where is the light? Where is the light? And you know, when you're young, sometimes you don't think you can talk to your parents. You don't think you can talk to your friends. It's almost, you feel embarrassed because people expect you to have it all together.
Yeah, and that is, that embarrassment, that pride is something that keeps a lot of people from coming to counseling, because they have this idea that I should be strong enough, smart enough, big enough, mature enough, grown enough to get through this. And, you know, that's not always the case. My philosophy is, if you need help, get help. You don't have to stay in pain any longer than is necessary. You know, why? What would be the point of that? So, you know, does it mean that you're weak? Does it mean that you, there's something wrong with you? I don't think so. I don't think it does. And we use this analogy all the time. If there was something wrong with you physically, would you stay in pain? Would you allow your ankle to swell up and, you know, to the size of a basketball? Or would you say, my ankle is swollen, I better go get that looked at? You know, so it's better to get it when it's small, when you first notice it, because then you can really get in there, have somebody who's an expert to give you some suggestions, maybe help you. Sometimes all you need is to talk it through, and you find the answer yourself, you know. So
what are some signs that, say if my friends or family weren't telling me I needed help, what are some signs that me as an individual that I could look at and say, okay, you're doing this, you're exhibiting these behaviors, I think you should recognize that these are signs that you need to get help? Is it staying in the bed for all day long, or is it just going to work and going through the motions? What is it?
Those are both good indicators. Staying in the bed. It's one thing to have a mental health day. It's another thing to stay in the bed for days and days and weeks where you're trying to avoid life, you know.
So if I don't like my job, then I can't just keep staying in the bed for 4 weeks.
Right. You'll get fired. Kind of like me. You can't do that. You have to support yourself. So When it starts becoming a problem with you being able to support yourself, with you maintaining your friendships, you don't want to answer the phone. And it's one thing if you don't want to answer the phone for a couple of days or for a week, but if it's months and months, then that may be a different story.
So then is it unnatural for me to say, I'm going through some things aren't going right, I don't want to burden my friends? So then you don't call them, you don't seek them out, you really try to deal with these things internally, and then you look up and like you said, 3 months have gone by, 4 months have gone by. Should we really, if we're feeling some type of way, start seeking out our friends or our family and letting them know that we are feeling some type of way, I'm dealing with something?
Well, certainly family and friends are support that we all need when we're going through a struggle. So that is, but it depends on the kind of family and the kind of friends. Because you have those.
We can't call Tyrone and
yeah, there are some friends that you do not want to call because they will bring you down. There are some family members that you don't want to call because they will just, make you feel worse. So you want to call those supportive family and friends. And if you keep going to them and they tell you the same thing, but you still find that you're stuck, then that may be the time that you want to seek out counseling.
Now, if we want to get help from Second Wind Counseling, how do we find you for speaking engagements or for counseling opportunities? How does our studio audience find out how to get in touch with you?
Okay, well, I would love to connect with anybody who is watching this program. You can go to my website, secondwindcc.com. That's all spelled out, one word, secondwindcc.com. Or you can call me at 816-767-9460. Again, that's 816-767-9460. My name is Dacia Moore. I'm a licensed professional counselor with Second Wind Counseling and Consulting.
I am so excited. I am very excited to be able to share this opportunity and Mrs. Dacia Moore with the community. I also want to let you know that this episode of Real with Tennille is actually sponsored by Autumn Orphe and Women of Imagery. So they're actually having the 4th annual Fresh Night of Fashion. It's going to be Sunday, April 6th. At the Vox Theater. It's 1405 Southwest Boulevard at Kansas City, Kansas. General admission tickets are $20. Doors open at 5:30 and the show starts at 6:30. And you can get tickets at womenofimagery.com. So definitely want to thank Autumn Orphe and Women of Imagery for their support. Also want to thank whatsupkansascity.net and Cascade Media. First and foremost, of course, please go to realwithtennille at Hotmail or Gmail to let us know your thoughts about the show. And please visit Second Wind Counseling so that we can make our community a safer and healthier place. Mm-hmm. Have an awesome day. This has been Real with Tennille. And remember, if you can't keep it real with yourself, you can't keep it real with Tennille.
What's up, Kansas City? I'm Brianna Garlington.
I'm Charles Williams.
And I'm Derek Parker.
And we are CMG. And we would like to welcome you to follow both websites. That's whatsupkansascity.net and cascadesports.tv.
Some of our programs consist of Are You Awoke?, Coach's Corner, and many more interviews, news, and blogs.
Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at Cascade Media Group and Twitter at What's Up KC and Cascade Sports.
And remember, the victory we call success
goes to the best prepared.
And when you invest in your community,
you are really just investing in yourself.
So don't just like it, share it.